Hello, before we get started on the video, I have two very big, very exciting, very connected announcements to make. A lot of you have been asking for this and it is finally happening. Oh my god. You might know that I have written a book, The T in LGBT, that has not been available on the typical American-based platforms until now. My book is now being published in the States next year and is available right now to pre-order on Amazon.com and other US-based websites that sell books. All the links you need are in the description box below if you are interested. And then what's the second announcement? I don't hear you asking, but I imagine you're curious. Well, to support the US launch of the book, Sharp and I are doing a US book tour next summer. Woohoo! Next Pride season, to be specific. And you can help decide where we go. If you want to come meet us and come to one of the events, then let us know what state you're in to help us plan where we should be going. All the details you need are in the description box below, and please go drop a potato in the comments to show some love. Yes, we love potatoes here. This should be a fun one. Are we ready? Hey Spuds, it's Jamie. Welcome back to another video. First video on the channel. I don't know, but welcome either way. Today we're doing something very interesting. Somebody has written an article. Somebody has taken the time to not only read my book, or read parts of my book at least, but they have written an article that has included my book. I feel so very honored. What I wanted to do today was read this article together and have a chat about it. Because if you didn't know, I have written a book called The T in LGBT. Everything you need to know about being trans. It's a part self-help guide, part memoir, all about trans stuff, my journey, other people's experiences, lots of different trans voices. A lot of things that you might want to know if you want to know more about being trans or trans people and whatnot. I'm saying this because it's not a nice article, okay? I don't know if that was already obvious. It's not the most pleasant thing, and I debated whether or not bringing attention to it because it was on a news site that is behind a paywall. I have free access through my phone, through Apple, for like the next couple months, which is how I could read it. I did not pay for it, and it didn't really do anything or go anywhere. But I was like, no, do you know what? I want to talk about it because people get the opportunity and get the platforms like this to write stuff that is complete lies and doesn't make sense. And so why can't I call that out and then also promote my book at the same time and be like, hey, if you want to read a book that is the truthful experience of what it's like to be trans and of trans people's lives, then this is the one, or one of the ones for you, not the transphobic ones. There are other really great trans books that I name in the back of my book. That would mean getting my book first. I will leave a list in the description box of some other great trans related books if you want to. But I thought we could have a little read and see exactly what somebody had to say about my book. What parents should do when their child says, I'm transgender. I mean, is there really a debate? The advice around that should be like, okay, listen to your child, see what they need to do, and let them be comfortable and explore their identity, because there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know why it's more complicated than that. Just to preface this, I'm not going to be including the name. So this article basically puts my book up against an opposing view. What is an opposing view? As if it's a debate. They kind of like talk about a book that is very not like mine, and then my book. I'm not going to name the other book because I don't want to give it publicity, and I'm also not going to name the person who wrote this article because I don't want to give them publicity. I've had a quick look at their Twitter though, and yeah, definitely running in some gender critical echo chamber circles, whatever you want to call it. There's definitely some opinions like that going on, it seems. Anyway, what parents should do when their child says, I'm transgender. These two guides for gender distressed children and their parents highlight the polarity of the transgender debate, the one that shouldn't exist in the first place. The T in LGBT+ by Jamie Rains, and something could not be more different. I like how instantly there's already a miscommunication about my book by saying that it's a guide for gender distressed children and their parents. The other one, right from the title, is quite clearly about trans kids. My one is not. Like, I'm not saying that younger people can't read it, but it's definitely aimed more towards a slightly older audience who are trans or not trans, and it is disingenuous, and I feel like potentially deliberate attempt at being like, this is what a trans person is telling kids to do. That's what it feels like. Could be a mistake, could be a misinterpretation of what my book is about. Who knows? Then there is a lovely little photo here from a TV show that actually, funnily enough, one of my videos with Shaba was in this TV show. It was about a family with a trans child called Butterfly. Let's get on with the article, shall we? Before I wrote this review, I looked up both titles on Amazon. Jamie Rains, a 29-year-old trans man who makes YouTube videos aimed aimed at young trans people had a near clean sweep of 5-star ratings. Amazing, brilliant. Thank you for speaking the truth. Oh, well, a glowing praise. I love it. Yes, the reviews on Amazon are lovely. Thank you so much for everybody who's left a review and or rating on Amazon. I very much appreciate it. There is actually one negative one now. Do you want to hear it? You cannot change your sex or gender. This is a book of lies. Trans propaganda. Lovely. It's still a near clean sweep. I'm very pleased that people like my book. But again, who makes YouTube videos aimed at young trans people. I make YouTube videos aimed at people wanting to learn more about trans people or learn more about being trans if that's how they are feeling, or just to feel less alone as a trans person. They are not aimed at young trans people. And actually, a majority of my audience are between 18 to 34 years old. Nearly the smallest chunk are under 18s. So again, no. Disingenuous. But equally, there'd be nothing wrong if I had written a guide for trans kids and their parents, or if I made videos aimed at young trans people, because there is nothing wrong with young trans people being told that they are allowed to be trans and it's okay for them to be trans. But it's just not the truth about my book and my content. It is accessible to younger trans people, but I haven't written a guide for trans kids. I don't make videos aimed at young trans people specifically. And I feel like that language is all designed to feed into this narrative of like, we must protect the kids. Look at these trans people.
They're targeting our children.
That's the kind of energy this has in it. I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but meanwhile, the other book had been deluged with negative reviews, calling it dangerous and bigoted. Very strange, since the book hadn't even been published at the time. Even stranger if you've read the book, which is compassionate and measured and urges parents to accept their children's decision to transition if that's what they eventually choose. Sounds very much like the whole kind of temporary reparative thing of like, let's wait. You're not allowed to do anything until you are a very specific age. And even that it's very like, they say that's what they're like, but are they really? I do also want to say that I've checked recently as well, and the last time I checked, one of the authors of this other book is the vice president of the Institute for Comprehensive Gender Dysphoria Research, which basically just peddles rapid onset gender dysphoria. So somebody who very much believes and buys into the myth of rapid onset gender dysphoria, because it is a myth, it's not a real thing, but someone who believes it's a real thing has written a book on how to approach trans children. Someone who thinks it's a social contagion has written a book, or co-authored a book with other people. Compassionate, measured. We're gonna reserve judgment on a book I haven't read, but based on who's written it, it gives me a pretty good idea because of their opinions, unless they've done a complete flip on their opinions with this specific book. But this is the fraught, angry world of trans activism. I love it. Trans people stand up for themselves. Ugh, how dare they? Where, in my experience, any questioning viewpoint must be crushed. I like how, and I'm not saying this is what's happening, but what I've seen is like people just be like outright, point blank transphobic and be like, being trans isn't valid, it's not a real thing. Then they've been called transphobic and they've gone, oh, how dare you? All I did was question something. And it's like, no, that's not what it is. Like, your viewpoint was not questioning, your viewpoint was bigoted and deserved to be called out for that. And it's very much just like victimizing of like,
I've done nothing wrong.
When really, like, transphobia is a horrible thing. It really affects people negatively. It affects trans people, and trans people don't deserve that. Reigns represents the affirmative camp. It shouldn't be a camp. The affirmative approach is the accepted approach by, like, all major medical boards. It is the approach that leads to better well-being, reduced gender dysphoria. It is the approach. It is not like a camp. The other approach is, like, if you don't believe in the affirmative approach, what do you believe in? Because the other option is conversion therapy. The idea that when a child says they are not their birth sex, they should be automatically believed and supported. Trans girls are girls, trans boys are boys, and non-binary children are non-binary, whatever that means in practice. I mean, in practice, that just means them expressing themselves how they feel comfortable, and what is the big deal with that? We trust cis kids to know themselves and to know how they want to express. I mean, typically, mostly as long as it's gender conforming, you know, but we trust cis kids in knowing themselves, but we don't trust trans kids, and I think that there's a very big double standard there. And so yes, I am very much in the camp of saying that we should not be forcing anybody to wear clothes or express themselves or go by pronouns or a name that makes them feel deeply uncomfortable and miserable. There's not a problem with just being like, hey, yeah, cool, I accept how you're feeling, let's roll with it. It doesn't cause any harm. Being in an unaccepting environment does cause harm though, just saying. The 3 authors of the book are mental health professionals who have collaborated to write the book. Take a different approach, of course they do. We don't believe there is such a thing as a trans child. They don't believe there's such a thing as a trans child, and this is called a compassionate and measured book. I don't really understand how you can then think that there are trans adults if you don't think there are trans children, because being trans is something you are born. It's not something that develops or suddenly happens to you. You are born trans, therefore there are trans children because there are trans adults. I was a trans child, I just didn't know it. I was trans when I was a child, I was not aware of the label. They don't believe that there is such a thing as a trans child. For them, gender distress is a real phenomenon, but a complex one. Nobody said it was simple. All that's being said is like, let's trust trans people more than close-minded cis people, and let's trust trans kids as much as we trust cis kids in knowing who they are, through which a child might be expressing any number of needs related to their inner life or their relationship to their family. Are they trying to say that gender distress is good? I just reacted to the Ken Zucker documentary, Transgender Kids Who Knows Best, and this just sounds like that. They're just like harping on about an approach that literally got somebody fired and a clinic closed down because it is not an appropriate approach to treating trans kids or trans adults or anybody who's trans, and they're literally here saying something very similar. This would not be a controversial approach to take in any other area of child development. It should be obvious to anyone who has been a teenager that, as somebody wrote, adolescents are on a roller coaster journey of self-exploration, angst and change. Something you are certain of at 14 or 16 may have little relationship to the person you are at 21 or 30. So put everybody on puberty blockers then. There is a very low regret rate of transitioning. The true desistance rates are very, very, very low. They're not the reported 80%. They were highly overinflated numbers from poor research. They're actually, the couple of percents. I think what you're saying is what this approach would be saying, we should just force everybody to go through the puberty that their body just automatically goes through. And then when they're 30 or something and they're still having these transy feelings, then whatever, they're an adult, they can do what they want. But what we're not realizing is that you're gonna force way more trans kids to go through something incredibly distressing that's gonna have a lifelong impact on them and cause a negative impact on their life and cause them to have more surgery than you would be risking people regretting. And what the regret would be for is going on puberty blockers. But honestly, when people say, we can't trust that kids are trans because when they're 14 or 16, they might not really know what they want in life, and that might change by the time they're 21 or 30. I like how broad a range 21 to 30 is. I'm not even 30 yet. Jesus, would they have wanted me to have not started yet? I don't understand how that can be said without understanding there is a major flaw in that if you are having that energy with trans kids not going through something irreversible until they're 21 or 30, then why not cis kids? Let's just stop all puberty because no child is old enough to know their gender until they're 30. Yet when you apply this banal observation to the issue of gender, you will immediately be cast as a malignant transphobe in some quarters. The way of twisting this to be I'm just trying to I'm just trying to point out the obvious. I'm just trying to be logical. Woe me for now being called a bigot. That's not what's happening though, is it? If you are sat there saying that you don't trust a child in knowing their gender simply because they are trans, and you think that they should therefore be forced to live as their assigned birth sex until they are a fully grown adult, that is close-minded of you. That is being transphobic. That is attempting some form of reparative therapy on that child by forcing them to live and be somebody they are not, and in a way that is incredibly uncomfortable for them and causes them a lot of misery. If you actually listened to trans people and trans kids and families who are accepting and have seen the difference in their child when they gained acceptance and all of this stuff, I really think less people would have this opinion, but they don't actually speak to trans people. The authors of this other book know this, and their aim in this book is to offer an alternative toolkit for parents of gender distressed children when most of the available resources push families towards transition. I don't appreciate this language of like push children to transition. It's like, oh, you're slightly gender non-conforming. Okay, we need to rush you down to the gender clinic and you will walk out with testosterone this very day, even though you are only 6 years old. That doesn't happen. In the UK, the youngest you can start hormones is 16. The youngest you can have any surgery is 18 related to being trans. And I believe you need parental consent if you're starting hormones below 18 as well. The alternative toolkit. So available resources don't push families towards transition. Available resources state that the gender affirmative approach is the accepted approach. The research tells us that people in more accepting environments have better well-being, and lower acceptance leads to lower well-being, and therefore there is no issue with accepting. There is a very high persistence rate in trans kids, and all that's involved for kids in terms of transitioning anyway is social things, and then maybe puberty blockers when they are at an age to start puberty, so like anywhere from 11 to 14ish. Very rare to get access to them though, especially in the UK. So really what this book must be stating is, do not accept your child being gender non-conforming and wanting to go by a name and pronouns and live in a way that makes them comfortable. No, you must force them to be uncomfortable and align with their assigned birth sex and live that way. That's what it's saying, because all that, pushing families towards transition is doing is saying like, your kid is trans, they're expressing that this is how they want to be referred to and this is what they want to wear. There is no harm in accepting that and just giving them an open and loving environment to explore who they are. Rains's book, oh, it's so weird having a surname that ends in an S. Rains's book shows what such parents are up against. As if it's a weapon. It's a book to help trans people and to help people understand trans people more and to help allies. It's not a weapon. It's chatty, accessible, and utterly glib about what transition entails. Glib means insincere and shallow. Yes, it's chatty and accessible. That was the aim of it, to feel accessible as a book around a topic that is often difficult to talk about and to talk with other people and to accept about oneself. So yes, I did want to make it accessible and friendly. That was not for any malicious intention other than to help trans people and to help allies. Insincere and shallow about what transition entails. I find that very insincere. I find that an outright lie, to be honest. One book cannot go into every single tiny detail. What is in this book, though, are the ups and downs. It shows the positives of transitioning in my life and other people's lives. It shows the difficulties involved in being trans, around self-acceptance, around coming out and not being accepted by other people, around access to healthcare, around surgical complications. I don't leave that stuff out. There is not every minute detail, but it is in there that I had complications, that other people have had complications. There is information about difficulties people have faced in various different realms of being trans and transitioning. Absolutely is not shallow about it. I think that's just misleading. It's clearly aimed at a child readership. Yes, that's why there's an entire chapter on dating and relationships, and entire chapters about things that are incredibly inaccessible for children, as in like surgeries. It's not aimed at a child readership. It's interspersed with cartoons and includes frequent interjections such as haha when Rains attempts a joke. I think I do not attempt a joke, I do a joke. There are jokes in this book and they're funny. Yes, my use of haha is not liked by everybody, but I'm sorry, it's just something I do. It's how I write. It's not for any specific reason. That's just what I do it in texts as well. Interspersed with the cartoons. Yes, because we all know that every graphic novel, every cartoon ever is only aimed at children. Cartoons means only for children. Aimed at children. Futurama, for children. Family Guy, for children. South Park, for children. The Walking Dead comics, for children. Many, many other things that are clearly not for children. They must be, because they have cartoons. This is an example of one of the cartoons. It's an illustration of me. Everybody likes a couple illustrations to break up the text. I just find that so weird. It's aimed at a child readership because it has pictures. Okay. If the other authors believe there's no such thing as a trans child, Rains appears to believe there's no such thing as a child who says they are trans who is mistaken. I don't ever say that. It's just this book is not aimed at people who are detransitioning or have made a mistake. This book is for people who are trans, who think they they are trans, who know a trans person, who want to learn more about trans people, who are trans allies and want to learn more about being a trans ally. I do actually have in the myth-busting chapter some stats on regret rates, and I include the references. So it's the myth of most people go on to regret transitioning. Detransition rates are high. Wrong. Detransitioning rates and regret rates are actually very low, with under 1% of adult trans people detransitioning. Another longitudinal study found 97.5% of kids who came out as trans still identify as trans 5 years later. The reason why it's not a big part of my book is because it's not even a part of being trans. Because if a child says they are trans and they are mistaken and they are part of that 2.5%, they've literally done nothing in their lives except express and live in a way that they have felt has been right for them and now realise was not right. Nothing else has been done. If they did reach puberty blockers, they are stopped. Reversible, they cause no permanent effects. Ta-da. Why would I write a book aimed at helping give advice to trans people and trans allies and focus in on the 2.5 to under 1% who either identify as trans as children and do not as they grow into adolescence, which are the 2.5%, or the under 1% that transition in some way and regret it? I think that gets plenty of airtime and overinflation without me needing to mention it in my book, but I do make it clear that it's not 100% of people who transition will go on to feel it was the right thing for them. It is stated in the book. And to say that Rains appears to believe there's no such thing as a child who says they are trans who is mistaken, there is research clearly included in my book that states that 2.5% of kids who identify as trans will not identify as trans as they grow older. So that's a bit of a lie. The book doesn't even consider the possibility that the young reader could be ill-served by a trans identity. Again, with like the obsession that my book is for children. I feel like it's coming just from a bad place. And /or as a way to directly compare it to this other book that's on the other side of the debate when it comes to trans kids, when it's not what my book is about. My book isn't about trans kids. They are mentioned. Oh, for God's sake, I just find it so bizarre. Could be ill-served by a trans identity. I do not make being trans sound like puppies and rainbows. I'm very honest about the experience and the difficulties with the experience. But again, my book isn't about trans kids and it's not about detransitioning. I don't know what they were expecting to find. A lovely big image of my book. Beautiful, thank you. Nor does it explore the implications of the fact that Rains's partner is a woman from a conservative Muslim background whose family used lesbian as an insult before Rains transitioned. That is discussed in the book. That's something that I have experienced and my wife experienced. Like, that is written about in the book as much as we wanted to share it in the book. It's also online. It's not something we've shied away from. The only reason they know that information is because we've shared it. What do they mean does not explore the implications of the fact that my wife is from a Muslim background whose family didn't accept us in the beginning? Also, it wasn't before I transitioned. It's discussed in the book, our experience with this. Only a transphobe, apparently, would think homophobia played any part in transition. Are they implying what I think they're... Hold on. Nor does it explore the implications of the fact that Rains's partner is a woman from a conservative Muslim background whose family used lesbian as an insult before Rains transitioned. Only a transphobe apparently would think homophobia played any part in transition. Are they implying that I transitioned because my wife's family were homophobic? Mate, I can tell you right now, we'd have had an easier time if we were a lesbian couple. Oh my God, the reach, the assumptions. They don't even know me. That is so bizarre. And so bizarre to bring this into a conversation about my book. It's a background about me and about my wife and about our family that is discussed in the book. And they were approved by the people they were about and the stories. I find it so bizarre I can't even be offended or angry about it. I just find it bizarre that this person has brought up this paragraph to be like, oh, by the way, he doesn't really go into any detail or explore the implications of the fact that his wife's family seems to be homophobic, but, you know, suggesting this, so, you know, only a transphobe would think homophobia pushed people to transition. This is something that is experienced in certain countries where being trans is seen as more acceptable, like being trans and straight is seen as more acceptable than being gay, and people are forced to transition, but that's not what happened with me. And it's also, lesbian wasn't used as an insult. It wasn't used as a homophobic insult. It was used as a transphobic one, and it was said after I started my transition. So get your facts right before you make such a very, very bold, incorrect statement. Instead, Rains jumps directly into educating teenagers about what being trans involves. Again, with the, yes, teenagers can read my book. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with teenagers knowing what being trans involves, what transitioning involves, because I don't think it makes anybody trans. I just think given who they're trying to make this appeal to, it's a very purposeful thing to be like, child-aimed book, educating teenagers about what it means to be trans. Okay. Top surgery, double mastectomy of healthy tissue to achieve a flat masculine appearance is represented with an illustration of a crossed out binder, the restrictive garment used to compress unwanted breasts. It's a trivializing way to represent a major operation. Why? I didn't need to wear a binder anymore. This is so petty. Is this all they could find wrong with my book? They read the book, don't know if they read the entire thing, and they're like, oh, they trivialized top surgery because there was a drawing of a crossed out binder. Really? I like the whole healthy tissue. You have an issue with it when it's trans men and trans masculine people having top surgery, but not an issue when cis men have it. I find that bizarre. Later on, Rains quotes a joke about titties being something you have removed like braces. Haha, indeed. That must have been a contributor. The illustration was in a timeline. I can show you. I have no issue. This person has just said some really bizarre things, and I have nothing to hide with my book or my transition or what I say. Here is the drawing, and then here is the crossed out binder. This is the offending image. I trivialized top surgery by including this. But funnily enough, my bare hairy legs did not trivialize lower surgery. Or maybe they did. I don't know. They're also just completely ignoring the fact that I go into a lot of detail about like preparing for surgery and knowing the risks and the complications involved and understanding that it's a big thing to go through, blah blah blah. Like, it's all just like, they did a drawing, bad, grr, don't like it. He does give some house room to the fact that transition has complications. Oh, I apologise, I did not read on quick enough. Rains's own bottom surgery in quotes, an operation to make the clitoris appear like a micro penis, was difficult. Yes, and you know that because I've shared it very publicly, but at no point does he suggest that any of these complications may be too high a price to pay for your gender journey. For your gender journey, too high a price? Ah, no, the price of a complicated lower surgery, too high. You cannot afford this. I don't think it's my place. I'm not telling people to get surgery. I'm also not there to tell people not to get surgery. People are autonomous. I am putting factual information in there about what it's like to be trans. I am a trans person. This book is filled with the voices of other trans people, and you are comparing it to a book not written by trans people. And I like how mine is the one that gets shat on in this kind of article. Thank you for recognizing the fact that I do go into the fact that transition and surgery can result in some complications and that it's not easy breezy. I'm not going to be sat there and be like, yes, it can have complications, so maybe you don't want to get it. I am giving people the information, and then people can make up their own decisions on what is right in their life and what they need to do. Because I bet you if I'd gone, hey, no, it really improved my life, this is how it reduces gender dysphoria, go get it. But on the other hand, these are the complications, don't get it. They'd have an issue with the fact that I told people to get it. I'm neither there to tell people to do something or not to do something. I'm presenting my journey, the journeys of other people, and the factual information around being trans and transitioning for people that want to read this kind of book and get this kind of information for whatever reason. And they can then use that information in whatever way is right for them. This person clearly felt like they wanted to use the information to pit me against a transphobic book. Lovely, but that was their choice, and it's my choice to go through it and turn it into promotion. In fact, the opposing viewpoint gets short shrift from Rains. I find it so bizarre being Rains. I'm actually Lowton Rains. In a myth-busting section, we're informed We're informed that in all this time, there has been no evidence that trans women have been a threat to cis, i.e. natal women. I don't say natal, that's why it's in the square brackets. This is simply false. There is no statistical evidence that trans women are a threat to cis women. They've named some people and then said are only the two most prominent examples of male to female transitioners who have committed violence against women. But reality cannot impinge on Reigns' politics. It's not my politics, it's my life. Thanks. My identity. Like, you're the one politicizing that. Reality is very much part of my stance on being trans. It's not everybody else's though, unfortunately. That's why things like this happen. What this person is forgetting is that cis women on cis women violence also exists. And they've picked 2 examples, and maybe if you pushed them, they could have come up with 4 or 5 examples. But look into it and you could find hundreds of examples of cis women who have committed violence against other cis women, and cis women who've committed violence against trans women. Some people commit violence against other people, and some of those people are from marginalised communities doing the violence or having the violence done to them. It happens. What the lack of evidence I'm talking about is trans women do not pose any greater threat to cis women than other cis women. As in, there is absolutely no evidenced reason, no legitimate reason to shun trans women from women's spaces. There is no safety issue to cis women. Just because you can think of a few names and a few examples, why are you putting that on a whole community? If we were to do that for every single community, everybody would be doing things individually. At least one person from every community in the world has done a bad thing. Just because you're from a marginalised community doesn't mean you can't be a bad person. And just because they're a bad person from marginalised communities does not mean that we should paint everybody in that community with the same brush. This has happened so many times, and we had the exact same thing. Transphobia is just recycled homophobia, because you go back a few decades and it was homophobes saying that lesbians couldn't use the same bathrooms as straight women because lesbians were going to be violent and they're a danger. And then we go back a bit further and it's black women cannot use the same bathrooms as white women because they are violent and they are a danger to white. We're just seeing the exact same thing happening again, but at this moment in time, trans women are the focus of attention. I'm not saying that racism and homophobia don't still exist, they do, but right now with this specific discussion, there's a very clear pathway of where this has just been recycled about different communities that are the easiest target for that moment in time. And right now it's trans women. The myth that I bust here is trans people accessing gendered spaces is dangerous as trans women are a threat to cis women. Wrong. Not true. So what I said is trans people have been using spaces of their gender for a long time and are legally protected in doing so in the UK under the Equality Act. Bodies that govern refuges support trans women being in these spaces. They recognise that trans women need this support too and pose no greater risk to cis women than other cis women. With a literal footnote citation, like actual research. And what this person has done is that it's gone, no, false, lies, the research is not true. They've also misquoted me and brought up, like, I can name 2 people, I can name 2 trans women who have done bad things. That means that yes, all trans women are a threat to cis women. Just bizarre. The other authors are far more willing to challenge their readers. The tone is warm and generous. It's posed as a bad thing, or it reads as if it's posed as a bad thing, that mine is chatty and accessible. Yet it's said in a positive way that the other book is warm and generous. Very similar things to me. The tone is warm and generous, but parents who resist their children's transition will not always feel comfortable reading this. There are acute insights about the way a parent can, by opposing, ultimately reinforce it. Avoid becoming as obsessed with gender as your child, they counsel. So they're like, oh, a child thinks they're trans.
They are obsessed.
The contrast in how they're writing about these 2 different books. Oh, the one by the trans person needs to be bad. Reigns encourages readers to treat their identity like shiny new Lego set from which they can build their newly found self. At the end of this process, they will find their trans joy. I said there can be trans joy. I highlighted the fact that there can be joy in being trans, and you can find trans joy and gender affirmation and positive things, because do you know what? It's not all doom and gloom, and it doesn't all need to be doom and gloom to be legitimate. There can be happy moments. And yeah, I did talk about, think of it as a Lego set that you get to rebuild your new self, because I like Lego, and I think metaphors make heavy topics a little bit more digestible, and I thought it might help people understand. The other authors make no such Pollyannish promises. I have to admit, don't know what Pollyannish, don't even know if that's how I pronounce it. Sorry, does that not work in my favour? Does that make me bad? Pollyanna, a person characterised by irrepressible optimism and a tendency to find good in everything. I'm not actually a massively optimistic person, to be honest. Like, I'm writing about my experience, and other trans people are writing about their lived truths, and they're foo-fooing it. I find it so bizarre. It's not like I go, oh, unwrap your new Lego set that is you during your transition transition and build yourself and find joy. That's not what the book is. It's very much can happen if you are allowed to be yourself and accept yourself and live as who you are. The book isn't all about saying you should transition and you will be happy. Anyway, so the other book makes no such, overly optimistic promises. I make no promises. They offer a strong corrective to the unevidenced claim that withholding affirmation leads to something that YouTube doesn't like to be said. But they are also clear that the future of the gender-distressed child may be complicated. They offer a strong corrective to the unevidenced claim that withholding affirmation leads to, let's just call it, low well-being and mental health issues. Actually, it is evidenced. Here is the evidence that transitioning and having access to healthcare leads to increased well-being and lower rates of said thing. I do find it funny how there's a couple times now they've gone, there's no evidence for this thing, and it's there quite clearly is. You're just lying. The outcome the parent hopes for, desistance or detransition, can be supported but not guaranteed. The outcome the parent hopes. So they are writing a book aimed towards parents who want their child to desist or detransition. Is this like a handbook on how to get the best possible chance to make your child desist or detransition? Your child may continue to struggle with their gender, as well as with all the underlying problems their gender may stand for. If a child reaches adulthood and opts for transition, parents are advised to be supportive. I don't understand why trans kids are just not trusted. Honestly, you can call me cynical. I don't want to buy this book, so I'm not going to, but I would want to read this because so many times and I'm not saying that's definitely what's happening here, I'm just saying from past experience, so many times I've read something written from a transphobic, gender critical, TERF, whatever perspective that is very much anti-trans or trans uncomfortable in some way, and they've been writing about something that is also in line with their own viewpoint and not the most trans friendly, and have vastly overinflated the level of acceptance and openness towards trans adults in that book, quite clearly not wanting kids to be trans. That is obvious that that's this book's intention. I've read sentences but we support trans adults kind of thing. I mean, didn't J.K. Rowling say something like that, and quite clearly does not seem to have that opinion based on her writings. So when I read that, I am very skeptical. It absolutely does not make up for the opinion on trans kids, but then it's but we accept trans adults, so don't be mad we're not transphobic because you can be a trans as an adult. But I've never actually seen one of these people who will write this kind of thing genuinely be okay with trans adults. Never, ever, ever, ever seen it. So it would be a first, but I'm not going to read this book to find out, because what I've read about it here, even in a glowing review trying to probably make it sound a lot friendlier than it is and more compassionate than it is, I'm still getting a vibe. I'm not going to put myself through that. I've read enough transphobic stuff. Rains, on the other hand, declares that anyone not entirely accepting of transition is a zombie, not even really a person. Oh my god. Okay, right, do you know what this is referring to? In my book, The T in LGBT, you can find it at the link in the description box. In my book, I didn't draw some zombies. Some wonderful friends of mine who are very talented drew the illustrations for me. There is an illustration of 3 zombies. It's my favourite illustration in the book. I love it. Basically, transphobia is not nice. Having to deal with transphobia is not nice. The zombies are not related to individual people. They are related to types of transphobia. So you have the werewolf zombie. These ones seem fine most of the time. Hold your hand, show acceptance every step of the way until something big happens like a full moon. That's when they show their true colours and you realise their acceptance of you isn't really acceptance because it's conditional. Transphobia sucks and it's really difficult to deal with. I did that as a metaphor to make it not as triggering or horrible for people to read, but to help people understand how difficult these types of almost hidden transphobia. It's people who are two-faced. It's people that occasionally are transphobic. It's not the outwardly constant transphobia, to show that it doesn't need to be like that for it to still be hurtful. So apologies for using a metaphor. Do you know, if you find that not comfortable, then you're being transphobic. I don't care. If you feel like you relate to being referred to as a zombie, as in the transphobia zombies, then yeah, I don't care. Some trans activists accuse those with critical perspectives of dehumanization, but only one of these books is telling people to treat themselves as a collection of interchangeable plastic bricks. Oh my god, this is so laughable. But like, this is an article? Somebody wrote that. To me sounds far more hateful and dangerous than the thoughtful stance taken by the other authors. Are they annoyed about the zombie thing? Treat themselves like a collection of interchangeable plastic bricks. This person that wrote the article does not understand metaphors. How can you, are they a journalist? I don't know. How can you be writing something like this and not understand metaphors? I mean, to be fair, they just seem to like not understand my book at all, let alone the metaphors in it. But yes, I think transphobes are actually zombies. I mean, I don't feel bad about saying that because transphobes cause a lot of harm and so do zombies. I genuinely think that trans people are just Lego bricks. I'm not a real human. I am just Lego. And being trans made me Lego. It's so bizarre. Anyway, I wanted to read that because I can't believe if that's the amount of bullshit said about my book. If it's equal level, the other book is really, really atrocious. Has it come out yet? Yeah. I believe it has come out. I mean, some of the things people have said is it's shocking that Amazon would stock something as dangerous as this book. Conversion therapy is being made illegal in many countries around the world, yet this book advocates it, pushing its dangerous and life-limiting practices in hopes to erase trans people from existence. One of the authors is called a trans conversion therapist. A lot of these reviews refer to conversion therapy, which really makes me think that this review was incredibly friendly towards it. I mean, whenever it's like, oh, here's the opposing view to the affirmative approach for trans people, I'm like, so conversion therapy then, you know, the one that should be illegal and is very inappropriate, very wrong and doesn't work. And even if they're like, only in childhood we accept trans adults, you're still causing harm. It's still wrong. You're not absolved of transphobia just because you say you're okay with trans adults, which I also am very skeptical on. A Dangerous Guide to Conversion Therapy. So this book has come out now and now does have reviews since it has been released. It also says it was published before this article was written. The person that wrote the article said that they looked up both titles on Amazon and my book had near clean sweep of 5-star ratings, amazing, brilliant, thank you for speaking the truth. On Amazon, they specified Amazon. You go down, they don't specify anywhere else, so they must still be talking about Amazon, right? Saying meanwhile, the other book has been deluged with negative reviews calling it dangerous and bigoted. Very strange since the book hadn't even been published at the time. Very strange because Amazon doesn't let you leave a review for a pre-order book. It literally says, can you review a pre-order book on Amazon? So we know that reviews offer social proof and can help sell your book. A listing with no reviews can alarm a potential buyer, but when your book is on pre-order on Amazon, you can't leave a review. You can't get reviews while a book is on pre-order. Was that the first lie of the article? Jesus Christ. When a viewpoint or an argument can't even rely on the truth to get their point across, then you know that it's probably quite shit. Anyway, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make this video and just remind people that I have written a book called The T and LGBT. I'm very proud of it. I hope it helps people. It helps people feel less alone and know how to better support trans people in their lives. And yeah, thanks for the publicity. I mean, I don't think it did much. I'm not sure many people read this article, but I'm sharing it here. Yeah, go leave your comments down below. Please let me know if you've read my book, what you think about it. If you do want to go leave it a review, that would be wonderful if you have read it. The links, if you want to go buy it, are down below. I'll also leave a list of other amazing trans-related books by trans people. You know, if you want to read a book about trans things, maybe read a book by a trans person or trans people. That would be a good start. And yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Much love. Bye.